And see, this all happened even before Rosa Parks refused to give her a receipt. This was 51. She didn't give a receipt to 54. See? And they always say that's the start. No, it's 51 is when Barbara Johnson and her classmates walked out.
We're
Ready?
ready. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So the purpose of us talking today is just to get some information about your experiences here as a student in Prince Edward County. And so could you just first start off telling me maybe like what grade you were in when the schools closed in Prince Edward County?
I had completed the 4th grade
Okay.
when schools opened. I turned 10 that summer.
Oh, okay.
And
Great. And what do you remember like about your reaction? I guess you were kind of young, but maybe your parents' reactions to the schools closing.
it was a mixture of emotions going on because I think that my parents were trying to kind of shield us a little bit because we were so young, and at the same time let us know that they had to tell us we weren't going to go to school. So that was a big deal for me because I actually walked to school before that. I lived in a little neighbor community called Peaks Community, Prospect, Virginia, and we walked to school every day. So just to find out that you're not going to be able to walk to school and go to school was devastating, even to a 10-year-old.
Sure.
Say, okay, where am I going to go?
I was gonna say, you remember that? Like, do you remember what you did that first day after there was no school to go to?
Well, actually, we went to one of the training schools.
Okay.
And the training schools was located in Prospect in the basement of a Methodist church.
Okay.
And we walked there every day then. Only our 1 mile walk to school turned into a 3-mile hike. So.
Oh, wow. Do you remember how long it took for the training center to be in place? So say schools closed one day and there's nowhere to go. Do you remember how long it took for you to actually get to the training center?
Well, it was pretty immediate because they knew all summer that
Okay.
schools were not going to open. My dad didn't tell us till the last minute probably, but
Okay.
the parents they knew, and so they were gearing up to do this because there was a lot going on in the community. And like Mr. Ward said that as early as 1955, they knew the whites had made a decision. If they bring down a decision that we have to integrate, guess what? We're not doing it. And so they were already gearing up for their schools. And so then the black children, I think that's one thing that pieced us left out because I don't think they were gearing up to have schools as much because who would think that they were not going to fund any kind of education, So.
So tell me a little bit about your experiences in the training center, and maybe if you could contrast that a little bit to your experiences prior in school.
Well, before the schools closed, I went to a community school. It was 3 rooms. We had 3 grades in one room and 3 grades in another room and a kitchen. And we had no indoor facilities. In fact, I can show you a picture, but we can do that later. But anyway, we had no indoor facilities or anything. So it was bad. The books were hand-me-down books because we always got the books from the white children. They were all torn and some had names and those kind of things. So I remember when the first day of school, you were going through trying to pick out the book, the best-looking book, But contrasting to the church basement was different because the church basement was not conducive to a classroom. It was just lines of tables and pews or whatever there that you had to sit on, and so the process was different. The one thing that I had that I was very fortunate to have is that my teacher, Mrs. Davenport, was my teacher at the schools before they closed. She stayed and taught us in the center, and so she was a no-nonsense person, and she would not let you feel sorry for yourself and say, this is what we got. This is what we're going to deal with, and you learned. And so we went there to that training center every day, and she kept us. I remember not going, and I remember not wanting to go, and I remember being in those books that we had, the few that we had, and we were doing our work. So the notion that you didn't learn was not present in ours, but the facilities were worse. If you can imagine it being worse.
And so how long were you in the training center? How many years?
I actually stayed in this training center 2 years
2 years?
because my parents thought that schools were going to reopen, so they were trying to wait it out. And, you know, some families, as we mentioned before, were being split up, and the Quakers were taken, you know, placed in different places. My husband had cousins that went to Ohio and different places like that to go to school, but my parents didn't want to split us up. And it was two of us that were, well, three of us were school age at that time. So, when we found out that we weren't going, we stayed there for 2 years, then they had to come up with another plan. So we actually went to Appomattox School, which is about 18 miles away from Prince Edward.
Oh, okay.
And that's where I stayed, and when school's open 63, I didn't come back, and I graduated high school in Appomattox.
Okay, so when the schools opened, you chose, your family, you guys chose to stay there for continuity's sake.
Well, actually, it's I don't know how deep you want me to go into the story, but there is a story to that because we fictitiously lived in Appomattox County. We rented a little house and pretended that we lived there and went to school. But when schools reopened, that's my dad decided, okay, I'm giving this up because they're just not going to do what's right, he said. And so we actually abandoned our house in Prospect in Prince Edward and went on to we stayed in Appomattox.
Makes sense. I would imagine being very nervous after they opened the schools up well about the quality and I could sense as a parent there would be a lot of apprehension.
Yeah, well, you know, and he said, I'm just not going to give them the opportunity to victimize you again. I'm just not going to go through that. So.
And so the school that you attended, was integrated?
No.
It was not integrated?
No.
Okay.
You see, what the situation was that when the decision said you have to integrate, that when I went to Appomattox, I was just floored to see that there were no white children in the school. I said, oh, man, Prince Edward's closed because we wouldn't integrate, but here I am with all black students. The sense there was that you could go to school in the school you want to and see that at that time they had built a new school for the black children. So they were kind of quasi-satisfied, you know, it was a nice school. And so nobody chose to go. It was not until 1967, I believe, that one of our black students went to what was then the white high school, and none of the white children came there. But then 68, they said, okay, you got to integrate. So that's when the schools actually integrated. In my school that I went to, there is now a museum. Every school I go to, there's a museum.
You just leave such a mark that they just have to memorialize it after you leave, right?
Take it to the museum. That's what.
If you had to name maybe a few, I guess for lack of a better word, kind of negative consequences of, just that whole experience, the school closings, having to go to another county, that sort of thing. What would they be? What would you say would maybe be the negative impact of that sort of experience?
There was a serious financial impact, negative financial impact, because we were trying to maintain two households and trying to go to school. There was a serious piece of illiteracy, because there were some students who never returned to school. Some of my fourth grade classmates never went back to school. So those social economic pieces, you can't go back and redo,
Right.
you know. So those were the negative things. And then another piece is that just to know that there was a small body of people who were so racist that they wouldn't give to even a court decision. You know that you lived in that kind of community it was negative for me.
So those social and economic and academic, that deprivation, now being a, lifelong resident of Prince Edward, so to speak, do you see that even carry on into those same, family lines today? Or would you say that somewhere along the line, someone in the family has been able to kind of, make up for those maybe deficits?
Well, I don't really think you can ever make up for it because we still have a problem with literacy in the area. But See, it was a mixed bowl with families because just with my family, my brother and I finished college and he went on to teach at college, and I finished college. My other brother who's school age, actually dropped out, ended up working on a farm cutting pulpwood, hating the whole system because felt very victimized, you know. So then there were some people in the family, it was my husband's family, he was his two brother and sister had already graduated, so he came through and graduated and went on to college and came back, but his other three siblings never got to go to finish school. So it's, you know, like I'm saying, it's a mixed motion, and I think that the one thing I saw was there was a lot of determination in spite of what was going on. People like his family went on to do things and work in DC and work for the school systems and, you know, found decent jobs. And my brother ended up going to work for the railroad where my father had, you know, worked for and retired from. So there was a determination, an attitude that no matter what happens, you're not going to keep me down, I'm going to do. But then there's some people who were still trapped in that situation. And there was no real way that they saw that they could get out, you know, so.
So how about some positives? I happen to believe that with every, you know, tragic situation, certainly there's something positive that can come out of it. So if you had to name a few positives out of your schooling experiences, what would they be?
Positively, determination. I mean, because when I saw what my parents went through to get us to school, I mean, I said, there's no way that I'm going to give up, you know. The positive things is that some of the people who went away, we have lawyers and doctors, and, you know, I dare to say that they may not have done those things had they not been put in a place or in with a family that they had to be successful or to stay, you know. So those are positive. One of the positive things is that people fought hard to have this museum, you know, the Martha E. Forster Council of Women bought this building because they were going to demolish it. They bought this building for $300,000. Can you imagine a group of little old ladies getting together and raising enough money to pay $300,000 for this building? Just because of what they thought, you know, what they were planning to do with it. And the fact that we had strong teachers. Mrs. Davenport, you know, when I went to Appomattox School, I knew everything that they were teaching in my grade because Mrs. Davenport was just such an awesome teacher. So those are positive things, and you had role models like that that you looked up to, you didn't want to let down.
And so, as you may know, there's this kind of phenomenon nationally where a lot of our African American students are being suspended from schools and being expelled from schools from behavior, and you know, people tend to think that they have harsher disciplinary measures than maybe some other students, and as a result, they're out of school. They're missing school. I think that they feel, you know, marginalized, and so there's a lot of policy talk and legislation talk about what can we do about this. And so if you had to speak to, you know, some of the folks who are responsible for setting legislation for these type of disciplinary measures that cause our African American students to not be able to obtain their education, what would you tell them about the effects of missing school or being shut out of schools, having experienced that personally? It's a little different situation, but this is what we're dealing with modern day. You know, what would you say to them?
I think they need to try harder. I think they need to reach out. I mean, there's a lot of legislation that can go on. You could try to legislate anything, but to work harder with the individuals, to work harder with the families, to see what's going on that causes this, to get more minority involvement. You know, a lot of our school systems now have very few minorities on their teaching staff. Recruit those people. You know, work with the individuals, because I think sometimes that we start to cluster students and generalize, you know, what's going to happen because of who you are or what your race is, that you're going to do this behavior patterns. I think we need to move past some of that, and I think they need to take a look at what happened in Prince Edward to see that these are the kind of things can happen if you don't pay attention. You know, get some of those parents involved. And I was telling when I was on the school board here that we had a whole different makeup because the parents that we were trying to involve in the school system were the parents and grandparents that were locked out of schools. So they have a different perspective on education than somebody who's sitting on the school board with a bunch of degrees. They have a different perspective. So, well, you know, they didn't care enough about me to even educate me. So why am I going to be caring about what's going on in school now? So we need to look beyond that and do research and look at the historical, you know, what's happened historically in our country and what, you know, because our students, when I was in school, elementary school, crowded, overcrowded, but there was nothing that substituted for your learning. So we need to look at the models that we're using and see, you know, where are we going wrong? You know, don't teach us those SOLs. Let's teach us something that's going to develop these students to where they need to go. I just think they need to pay more attention.
That's wonderful. And so last question, I have learned a lot having a tour of the museum today and spending some time in Prince Edward County. So if you could tell folks just about Prince Edward County and about the education here and about the experiences here, what would you want people to know about Prince Edward County, Virginia?
I would want them to know that Prince Edward has a lot of historical roots to the major educational decisions that are made in this country. I want them to know that we are thriving, that there's a sense here that we need to do better. We still have issues and problems like they have every place else, but Prince Edward is one of those places that we're trying to tell the story of everybody who's involved in the closing of schools. White, black, wherever you were, there's a story to be told. And I think that there's historical value in people. I would want them to realize it and see where we've come from since 1951 and see that there's a path that we're a positive path we're going to.
Great, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Okay.
You know, was it Davis or Davy?
Davis.
Davis. You know, what kind of party ground was it? I don't really think it's Davis. That's all I know. That's all they really taught. You know, if you don't really delve in, that's all you're really taught in school. That's what's in the books.
Exactly.
You know, and then you just read that and that's it.
Yeah.
And so unless you really delve into it, you don't really know. So I think it's going to be great. So yeah, it's like 7 of us, and so we're just going to go over. So I'm like preparing. Some more people are looking at the time period of 52. They're looking at one person's actually has something you touched on now, and so you want to talk about you want to affect change. Yeah.
You know, when you see it's blatant in front of you, you see hospitals and we're talking distracting chickens. You see it right there. You know, I observe that. And so now it's less blatant than it was. You know, but it's still there. But it's not as prominent.
Yeah.
You know, you won't still school down with chicken coop back there. You won't see that. But you will see inferior schools.
Oh, yes. We were talking about that coming down here about the difference in the DC schools and the charter schools. That, you know, talking about when we're speaking of, you know, what's the role of the state as far as educated children. There's a lot of talk about, you know, well, all of these charter schools are being established in DC. So then, you know, what role will the public schools have? Because all the kids that are in the public schools are now going to these charter schools. But then those that can't get into the public schools or that can't afford private schools, what type of education are they going to get? You know, and I think is coming down here is kind of giving me a different perspective and view of that, you know.
Yeah, and one thing too, you gotta have a staff teachers that do it, you know, because like I said, we might have horrible conditions. That those teachers share, you know, if you didn't learn, you have a problem. I'm going to you have it. And so it's different things. It's just not there now. And parents sometimes drop the ball because they're expecting teachers to do it. When you gotta be on it, pulling up yourself and not expecting it.
We looked at this research by
ain't gonna see, you know, but you're outside of the environment. But when she stepped up and took the responsibility, she couldn't even stay here forever. They had to move her to Alabama with her uncle, Burlington, and moved into Alabama being safer than.
I thought about that when she said she taught at high school, so it's like being able to see the difference. Because if you're in it, you might not, I mean, you know it's bad, and you don't really know how bad it is.
See, that was me.
Yeah.
When I was in fourth grade, I thought everybody
Right.
was, you know, I thought
Yeah.
everybody had torn books.